Wyoming Territory, 1878. Winter had sunk its teeth into the high country early that year, blanketing the rolling foothills of the Bighorn Mountains in a pristine shroud of white that glittered like scattered diamonds under the pale November sun. Zachary Harding pulled his wool coat tighter around his lean frame as he urged his dun gelding forward through the knee-deep snow. At 25, he'd already seen enough of the frontier's harsh realities to know that beauty and danger rode the same trail out here. "Not much farther, Dusty," he muttered to his horse, watching his breath plume in the frigid air. "Just need to check that northern fence line, then we'll head back to the ranch." The truth was, Zach preferred these solitary rides to the cramped bunkhouse at the Triple Crown, where he'd worked as a hand for the past 2 years. Out here, with nothing but miles of empty country around him, a man didn't have to pretend, didn't have to laugh at coarse jokes or share whiskey around the fire while spinning yarns about women in far-off towns. Out here he could just be, and what he was, deep down where no one could see, was alone, deliberately, defensively alone. The West had taught him early that attachments were dangerous things. His parents' homestead burned to the ground by rustlers when he was 16. His best friend shot dead in a senseless saloon argument 3 years back. His own heart nearly claimed by a Cheyenne arrow during a cattle drive gone wrong. No, Zachary Harding had learned his lesson well. Survival meant keeping to yourself. Love was just another word for vulnerability, and vulnerability got you killed out west. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it something unexpected, a sound that didn't belong in this frozen wilderness. Zach reined Dusty to a halt, tilting his head to listen. There it was again. A woman's voice, clear and pure, rising and falling in what sounded like a hymn. Curiosity overrode caution. He turned Dusty toward the sound, following it over a gentle rise. In the small valley below stood a modest cabin, smoke curling from its stone chimney. Outside, a young woman in a faded blue dress and heavy shawl stood near a crude wooden cross planted in the snow. Her golden hair caught the sunlight and her breath made small clouds as she sang, her voice carrying in the still winter air. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." She was singing to someone who wasn't there. Someone who would never return, something twisted in Zach's chest, recognition, perhaps, or the unwelcome stirring of empathy. He'd made it a point not to feel too much since burying his family. Yet here he was, transfixed by a stranger's grief. As if sensing his presence, the woman suddenly stopped mid-verse and turned, her eyes widening at the sight of him on horseback. They were startling blue, those eyes, clear as mountain lakes against her wind-flushed cheeks. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Zach called, tipping his hat. "Didn't mean to intrude." "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice steady despite the surprise that lingered in her expression. "No, ma'am, just riding fence for the Triple Crown. Your property borders the North Range." She nodded, tucking a strand of golden hair beneath her woolen shawl. "You must be one of Mr. Donnelly's cowboys, then." "Zachary Harding," he confirmed with another tip of his hat. "Been with the outfit about 2 years now." "Dahlia Caldwell," she replied. Up close, he could see she couldn't be more than 22, though something in her eyes spoke of burdens beyond her years. "This was my father's homestead, it's mine now." Her gaze drifted back to the wooden cross, and Zach knew without asking that it marked a recent grave. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, the words feeling inadequate. "Thank you," she drew her shawl tighter. "My father passed in September, pneumonia. I've been managing on my own since then." Zach frowned. Winter was no time for a woman alone in Wyoming Territory. "You have kin nearby." "None," she said simply, "but I'm managing just fine, Mr. Harding." The wind picked up, cutting through Zach's coat. Dahlia Caldwell didn't flinch. "I should be getting back," she said, gesturing toward the cabin, "and you have fences to check, I imagine." Something made Zach hesitate, the lonely figure she cut against the vast white landscape, the quiet dignity in her posture. The way her voice had filled the empty valley moments ago. "Miss Caldwell," he found himself saying, "winter's settling in hard this year. If you need anything, firewood, supplies from town, the ranch hands ride this way regular. Would be no trouble to stop." She studied him with those clear blue eyes. "That's very kind, Mr. Harding, but as I said, I'm managing." Zach nodded, acknowledging her pride even as he noted the thinness of the smoke from her chimney, suggesting she was conserving firewood. Good day to you then, he said, turning Dusty back toward the fence line, and to you, Mr. Harding. As he rode away, Zach couldn't shake the image of Dahlia Caldwell standing in the snow, singing to someone who would never answer. Nor could he ignore the uncomfortable recognition that stirred in his chest. They were alike, in a way, both stubbornly alone in a land that punished solitude, but that was the West. You survived however you could. And Zach had learned that entanglements only made survival harder. Still, as he checked the sagging fence line, he found himself listening for the distant melody of her voice carried on the winter wind. 3 days later, Zach was loading supplies at Hartwick's general store in the small settlement of Pine Ridge when the owner, Edgar Hartwick, mentioned Dahlia Caldwell's name. "Shame about James Caldwell passing," the storekeeper said as he measured coffee beans. "Fine man, honest as the day is long, that daughter of his is cut from the same cloth." Stubborn as a mule, though, turned down Sheriff Miller's offer to escort her back east to her mother's people. Zach's hands stilled on the sack of flour he was lifting. "She has family back east." "Her mother's side, yeah. Folks in Boston or some such place, proper society from what James used to say." Edgar wrapped the coffee in brown paper. "But Miss Dahlia, she won't leave, says the homestead is her father's legacy. Fool girl's going to freeze to death before spring, living out there alone." "She seemed capable," Zach offered, surprising himself by joining the conversation. Edgar snorted. "Capable, sure. But winter in these parts ain't about capability, it's about preparation. James always had that place stocked to the rafters by first snow, but he took sick in August, right when they should have been laying up stores." Zach thought about the thin smoke from her chimney, the solitary figure singing hymns in the snow. "Put another cord of firewood on the Triple Crown's account," he heard himself say, "and some extra coffee and flour, sugar too." Edgar raised an eyebrow. "Donnelly authorized that." "I'll clear it with him, neighborly duty." The storekeeper shrugged. "Your funeral if he disagrees. Want me to deliver it out to the Caldwell place?" Zach shook his head. "I'll take care of it." An hour later, with Dusty pulling a laden sledge, Zach approached the Caldwell homestead. This time, Dahlia wasn't outside singing. Smoke curled more robustly from the chimney, and he noticed fresh tracks in the snow leading to a small barn behind the cabin. He was just unloading the first armful of firewood when the cabin door opened and Dahlia stepped out, a shotgun cradled in her arms. "Mr. Harding," she said, lowering the weapon slightly. "What are you doing here?" "Bringing supplies," he said simply. "Winter courtesy." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't accept charity." "It's not charity, Miss Caldwell, it's an exchange." He continued stacking wood near her door. "Triple Crown owes you for grazing rights on your north meadow. Mr. Donnelly sent me to square accounts." It was a lie, of course. As far as Zach knew, the Triple Crown had no formal agreement with the Caldwell homestead. But it sounded better than pity. Dahlia's posture softened slightly, though suspicion still clouded her features. Father never mentioned grazing rights. Maybe he thought it wasn't worth mentioning. "Small parcel of land, small payment." Zach gestured to the supplies. "Nothing fancy, just practical goods." She considered this, then set the shotgun aside. "I can pay for whatever the difference might be." "No need." "This squares it," Zach finished stacking the wood. "I'll bring in the rest of the supplies if that's all right." After a moment's hesitation, Dahlia nodded. "You can set them on the table." The cabin's interior was modest but meticulously kept. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its small fire casting dancing shadows across simple furnishings. Books lined a crude shelf, and near the window stood a small organ, its wood polished to a soft gleam. "That was my mother's," Dahlia said when she caught him looking at the instrument. "She taught music in Boston before she married father and came west." "Is that where you learned to sing?" Zach asked, setting the flour and coffee on the rough-hewn table. A flush crept into her cheeks. "You heard me. Hard not to, voice carries in this valley." "I didn't realize anyone was around to hear." She busied herself arranging the supplies. "My mother taught me. She died when I was 12. Influenza, father said I had her gift." Zach nodded, unsure what to say. The cabin felt suddenly too small, too intimate. This wasn't why he'd come. he'd meant only to deliver the supplies and leave, not to learn about Dahlia Caldwell's dead mother or her musical talents. "Well, I should get back," he said, moving toward the door. "Ranch work doesn't stop for snow." "Mr. Harding," she called as his hand touched the latch. "Thank you for the supplies, I mean." He nodded, not meeting her eyes, just being neighborly. "Perhaps," she said, "but neighbors or not, kindness deserves acknowledgement." Outside, as Zach hitched Dusty back to the empty sledge, he found himself wondering why he'd really come. It wasn't the ranch's responsibility to look after James Caldwell's stubborn daughter. It certainly wasn't Zachary Harding's. Yet as he rode back toward the Triple Crown, he couldn't shake the image of Dahlia standing in her modest cabin, proud and solitary, like a single pine resisting the winter winds. Something about her reminded him of himself before he'd learned the frontier's harsh lessons, determined to stand alone, unaware of how quickly the wilderness could break a solitary spirit. "Not your concern, Harding," he muttered to himself. "Not your problem." But 3 days later, when Foreman Bill Jenkins announced they needed someone to ride the north fence line again, Zach volunteered before anyone else could speak. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing blizzards that howled down from the mountains like vengeful spirits. The Triple Crown Ranch battened down, the cowboys venturing out only to tend the closest herds and maintain the most essential operations. Zach found himself thinking of Dahlia Caldwell often during those bitter days, wondering how she was faring alone in her cabin. When the storm finally broke after 5 relentless days, Zach approached Curtis Donnelly, the ranch owner. "Mr. Donnelly, I'd like to check on the Caldwell place, make sure the widow's daughter weathered the storm." Donnelly, a gruff but fair man in his 50s, raised a bushy eyebrow. "The Caldwell girl. Thought she'd have sense enough to head east after her pa died. She's staying put, determined to hold onto the homestead." "Foolish," Donnelly grunted, "but admirable, I suppose." He studied Zach's face. "Any particular reason you're volunteering?" Zach kept his expression neutral, just being neighborly. "She's alone out there." Donnelly's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "Take some supplies. Tell her if she needs help, the Triple Crown looks after its neighbors." The ride to the Caldwell homestead took twice as long as usual, with Dusty having to navigate snowdrifts that sometimes reached his chest. When the cabin finally came into view, Zach felt a rush of relief at the sight of smoke rising from the chimney. He was halfway to the door when it swung open. Dahlia stood there, wrapped in a heavy blanket, her golden hair loose around her shoulders. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the silence broken only by Dusty's snorting breath. "You survived the storm," Zach said finally. "As did you," she replied, her voice carrying a note of relief that mirrored his own. "Though I wasn't the one foolish enough to ride out in this. Triple Crown business," he said, dismounting, "checking on neighbors." She smiled, and something in Zach's chest tightened. It was the first time he'd seen her smile. "Well, since you've ridden all this way, you might as well come in for coffee," she said, stepping back from the door. "Your horse can shelter in the barn." The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what Zach needed after the frigid ride. They sat at Dahlia's small table, the fire casting a warm glow across the room. "I was worried," Zach admitted after his second cup. "That storm was fierce." "I was prepared," Dahlia said. "Thanks in part to your grazing rights payment." Her blue eyes held his, and he knew she'd seen through his lie. "There is no agreement between my father and the Triple Crown, is there?" Zach shifted uncomfortably. "Not a formal one, no." "So why did you bring those supplies?" He could have lied again, could have fabricated some story about ranch policy or Donnelly's orders. Instead, he found himself saying, "Because I heard you singing to your father's grave, and it reminded me of something." Dahlia's expression softened. "What did it remind you of?" "That we've all lost something out here. And sometimes," he struggled to find the right words, "sometimes it helps to know you're not alone in that." She was quiet for a long moment. "My father always said the frontier strips people down to their truest selves. That you find out who you really are when there's nothing between you and the elements." "What do you think you found out about yourself?" Zach asked. Dahlia looked toward the window where snow continued to fall gently. "That I'm stronger than I thought and more scared than I like to admit." Her gaze returned to him. "What about you, Mr. Harding? What has the frontier taught you about yourself?" The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him anything like that in years, certainly not a woman with eyes the color of summer skies. That survival sometimes comes at a cost, he said finally, and that I've been willing to pay it. What cost? Connection, the word felt strange on his tongue. You can't lose what you don't have. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Is that why you're still just Mr. Harding to everyone at the Triple Crown after 2 years? Zach blinked, surprised by her perception. How did you? Mr. Donnelly came by last fall when father was ill. He mentioned his new hand who kept to himself, said you were reliable but reserved. That Harding boy rides alone, I believe were his words. Safer that way, Zach murmured. Safer, Dahlia agreed, but lonelier too. Before Zach could respond, a sudden gust of wind rattled the cabin windows, drawing their attention. The snow was falling faster now, the light fading as afternoon gave way to early evening. You shouldn't try to ride back in this, Dahlia said, rising from the table. The barn loft has some old bedding. You can shelter there for the night. Zach nodded, knowing she was right. The temperature would drop dangerously after dark. I'll see to Dusty then. Later, after settling his horse and preparing the loft for himself, Zach returned to the cabin to thank Dahlia for her hospitality. He found her seated at the small organ, her fingers moving lightly over the keys as she played a melancholy tune. That's beautiful, he said when she finished. What is it? Just something my mother taught me. She turned on the bench to face him. Will you be comfortable enough in the barn? I've slept in worse places. He hesitated at the door. Thank you, Miss Caldwell. I'll be gone at first light. She nodded, but as he turned to leave, she called after him, Mr. Harding. My father always said music sounds better when shared. If you'd like, I could play something else before you retire for the night. Something in her voice, a gentle invitation, a reaching out, made it impossible to refuse. Zach found himself returning to the cabin, settling into a chair near the fire as Dahlia's fingers found the keys again. This time, she played a hymn he recognized from childhood, her clear voice rising to join the melody. Be still, my soul, the Lord is on thy side. The music filled the small cabin, weaving around them like a spell. For the first time in years, Zach felt something inside him ease, a tightness he hadn't even realized was there beginning to loosen. And as the snow fell outside and Dahlia Caldwell's voice rose and fell with the ancient hymn, Zachary Harding wondered if perhaps there were some things worth the risk of loss after all. The weeks that followed saw Zach riding to the Caldwell homestead whenever duty permitted. At first, he maintained the pretense of checking fence lines or delivering ranch messages. But as December deepened toward Christmas, the excuses grew thinner until finally he stopped making them altogether. You're becoming a regular visitor, Mr. Harding, Dahlia remarked one crisp afternoon as they walked the perimeter of her property, checking for winter damage. Zachary, he corrected, or Zach, we've shared enough coffee that formalities seem unnecessary. She smiled, her breath clouding in the cold air. Zachary then, and you may call me Dahlia. Dahlia, he repeated, liking the way it felt on his tongue, like the flower. My mother's choice, she missed her garden when they came west. Dahlia paused to examine a loose board on the chicken coop. Father always said I grew as stubbornly as my namesake, thriving where I wasn't meant to. Zach handed her a hammer from his belt. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, her voice softened with memory. He taught me everything I know about this land, how to read the weather, track game, mend fences. She secured the board with quick, practiced movements. He'd be pleased to see the homestead continuing. Is that why you stayed? To continue his work. Dahlia handed back the hammer, her gloved fingers brushing his. Partly, but also because this is home now. I've lived here since I was 14. I don't belong in Boston drawing rooms any more than a wild mare belongs in a carriage team. What was it like, Boston? Restrictive, all corsets and calling cards and careful conversations. She made a face that made Zach laugh. My mother's family never approved of father. They thought he was stealing her away to barbarism. And was he? Dahlia considered this as they continued walking. He brought her to hardship, certainly, but also to freedom. Mother used to say she felt more alive here in one day than in a year of Boston society. her blue eyes met his. I think that's worth something, don't you, feeling alive? Before Zach could answer, a distant gunshot echoed across the valley. Both froze, instinctively scanning the horizon. Hunters maybe, Zach suggested, though his hand moved to the revolver at his hip. No one hunts on Caldwell land without asking, Dahlia said, her voice tight. Not since father caught poachers 3 summers ago. A second shot rang out, closer this time. Get back to the cabin, Zach said, drawing his weapon. Lock the door. Dahlia shook her head. This is my land, I'm not hiding. Dahlia. I have my own rifle, Zachary, I know how to use it. Before he could argue further, 3 riders crested the hill to the east. Even at a distance, Zach could tell they weren't ranch hands or local settlers. They rode hard and reckless, whooping as they approached. Inside, Zach insisted. Now. This time, Dahlia didn't argue. They hurried back to the cabin, where she retrieved her father's Winchester from above the fireplace. Together, they stepped onto the small porch just as the riders pulled up in a spray of snow. The leader, a burly man with a thick beard and cold eyes, surveyed the homestead with obvious interest. His companions, one wiry and sharp-faced, the other young with a cruel smile, flanked him. Afternoon, the bearded man called, his tone falsely pleasant. Hope we ain't interrupting. You're trespassing on private property, Dahlia said, her voice steady despite the rifle held tightly in her hands. State your business or move on. The man chuckled. Feisty little thing, ain't she? He remarked to his companions before addressing Dahlia again. Name's Vince Hollies. These are my associates, Leo Stark and Pete Wilkins. We're just passing through looking for shelter from the cold. Spotted your chimney smoke. Zach kept his revolver lowered but ready. Something about these men set every instinct on alert. There's a town 15 miles south, Pine Ridge. Proper lodgings there. 15 miles is a long way in this cold, Hollies said, his eyes shifting between Zach and Dahlia. We was hoping for Christian charity a bit closer. I'm afraid we can't help you, Dahlia replied. As you can see, our accommodations are limited. Hollies' friendly facade slipped slightly. That's not very neighborly, miss. 3 weary travelers and you won't even offer coffee. The lady said no. Zach stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Dahlia. Best be on your way. The younger rider, Pete, snickered. Looks like she's got herself a watchdog, Vince. Hollies' cold eyes narrowed. Indeed she does. He studied Zach more carefully. You look familiar, Cowboy. We met before. No, Zach said flatly. Now move along. A tense silence followed, broken only by the stamping of horses in the snow. Finally, Hollies shrugged. All right then, we'll try our luck elsewhere. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good day to you, miss, and to you, watchdog. The 3 men turned their horses and rode away, but not before Hollies cast one last, assessing look at the cabin. They'll be back, Zach said once the riders were out of sight. Men like that don't give up easily. Dahlia's knuckles were white around the rifle. Who were they? Trouble, Zach holstered his revolver. Drifters maybe, or worse. Outlaws. Possibly, he didn't want to frighten her, but the frontier held no place for comforting lies. You shouldn't stay here alone tonight. Come back to the Triple Crown with me. Dahlia shook her head firmly. I'm not abandoning my home because of 3 bullies. This isn't about pride, Dahlia. It's about safety. It's about everything my father worked for. Her blue eyes flashed with determination. I won't be scared off my own land. Zach recognized the stubborn set of her jaw. She wouldn't be persuaded. Then I'm staying. You don't have to. Yes, I do. The vehemence in his voice surprised them both. More quietly, he added, please let me stay. After a long moment, Dahlia nodded. All right. That night, after a simple supper of beans and biscuits, they sat before the fire, the tension of the afternoon's encounter gradually easing from their shoulders. Zach had insisted on taking the first watch, planning to sleep later in the rocking chair positioned to face the door. Will you tell me something, Zachary? Dahlia asked as she mended a tear in one of her father's old shirts. Something true. He looked up from cleaning his revolver. What do you want to know? What happened to make you so determined to stay alone? Her hands stilled on the fabric. You've been at the Triple Crown 2 years, yet you have no close friends there. You ride the range alone when most cowboys work in pairs. Today you were ready to face 3 armed men without hesitation, but you keep everyone at a distance. Her gaze was gentle but unflinching. Why? Zach set his weapon aside, considering his answer. No one had asked him such a direct question in a long time. No one had cared enough to notice the walls he'd built. When I was 16, he began slowly, my family had a homestead near the Powder River, nothing fancy, just a small cabin and some livestock. One night, rustlers came. My father tried to stop them from taking our horses. They shot him, burned our cabin with my mother inside. The memories surfaced like old bruises, tender but no longer raw. I wasn't home, I was fishing downstream, came back to find everything gone. Dahlia's eyes filled with compassion. I'm so sorry. Zach nodded, accepting her sympathy but pressing on with the story. After that, I drifted, worked cattle drives, ranch jobs, made a friend named Thomas in Colorado. Good man, steady. We rode together for almost 3 years. Then one night in a saloon in Laramie, some drunk took offense to something Thomas said, shot him point blank before I could even reach for my gun. He stared into the fire. After that, I decided it was simpler not to get attached. Can't lose what you don't have. But that's no way to live, Dahlia said softly. Without attachments, without connections. That's just existing. Existing keeps you alive. Is that enough? She set her mending aside and moved to kneel before him, her face illuminated by the firelight. Is surviving all you want from this life, Zachary? Her question hung between them, challenging the belief that had guided him for years. Looking into Dahlia's earnest face, Zach found himself without an easy answer. It's what I know, he said finally. Then perhaps it's time to learn something new. Her hand found his, warm and small but surprisingly strong. I thought I knew what my life would be too, taking care of father, managing the homestead. Then he died and everything changed. I could have given up, gone back to Boston, but instead I'm finding new ways to live. She squeezed his fingers. Maybe you can too. Something shifted in Zach's chest, a wall crumbling, a door opening to a room long sealed. Before he could respond, however, the sound of approaching horses shattered the moment. Both were on their feet instantly. Zach peered through the window, counting 5 mounted figures approaching in the moonlight. It's them, he said grimly. Hollis and his men, they've brought friends. Dahlia was already reaching for her rifle. What do they want? Nothing good. Zach checked his revolver, then retrieved the shotgun he'd positioned by the door. They're after the homestead, most likely. Remote location, established structure. Perfect hideout for men running from the law. What do we do? Get ready to defend what's yours, Zach met her eyes. I'll stand with you, Dahlia, whatever comes. She nodded, fear evident in her face, but outweighed by determination. Together, then. Outside, Hollis's voice carried through the night. Hello, the cabin. Come on out and talk, Miss Caldwell. We've got a proposition for you. Zach positioned Dahlia at the window to the left of the door while he took the right. Don't shoot unless they make a move, he whispered. But if they do, aim true. I will, she promised, her voice steady. Zach opened the door a crack, keeping his body shielded. State your business and then move on, Hollis. The bearded man sat easily in his saddle, flanked now by 4 companions. Ah, the watchdog's still here. Figured as much. His tone was conversational, almost friendly. We've been thinking about Miss Caldwell's situation. Young woman, all alone out here, it's not safe. She's not alone, Zach said firmly. For now, Hollis agreed. But you're just passing through, Cowboy. You'll ride back to your ranch eventually. She needs more permanent protection. He spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. We're offering to provide it. In exchange for using this place as a base of operations, we'll make sure no harm comes to the lady or her property. What kind of operations? Dahlia called, her rifle steady at the window. Hollis smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Business ventures, nothing for a decent woman to concern herself with. You mean robbery, Zach translated, maybe worse. Such ugly words, Hollis sighed. We're simply men of opportunity in a hard land, and we're giving you a chance to be reasonable. His voice hardened. One chance. The answer is no, Dahlia said clearly. This is my home, you're not welcome here. Hollis's expression darkened. That's unfortunate, miss, very unfortunate indeed. He nodded to his men. Burn her out. Two riders dismounted, moving toward a shed with torches already prepared. Zach didn't hesitate. His first shot caught one man in the shoulder, sending him sprawling in the snow. The second missed as the outlaws scattered, diving for cover. Get back, Zach shouted to Dahlia as bullets splintered the doorframe. He slammed the door shut just as gunfire erupted from multiple directions. They're surrounding the cabin, Dahlia said, her voice remarkably calm despite the chaos, two trying to circle behind. Zach moved to the rear window, firing twice at shadowy figures attempting to approach from behind. One fell, the other retreated. For several minutes, gunfire peppered the cabin from all sides. Zach and Dahlia returned fire when targets presented themselves, conserving ammunition. The initial fusillade eventually slowed to occasional shots, followed by an eerie silence. They're regrouping, Zach whispered, crouching beside Dahlia near the front window. How's your ammunition? 6 rounds left. Her face was smudged with gunpowder, her golden hair falling from its pins, but her hands were steady on the rifle. I've got 8 in the revolver, 4 shells for the shotgun. Zach's mind raced through options, none of them good, if they rush us all at once. We'll make every shot count, Dahlia finished. Holly's voice called out from the darkness. You're outgunned, Cowboy, be smart, send the woman out and you can ride away. No one needs to die tonight. Except Miss Caldwell, once you've got what you want, Zach called back. Not happening, Hollies. Have it your way, the outlaw leader growled. Boys, light 'em up. A flaming arrow arced through the night, lodging in the cabin's roof with a dull thunk. A second followed, then a third. They're trying to smoke us out, Dahlia said, staring up as small tendrils of smoke began seeping through the ceiling. Zach's mind flashed to his childhood home, engulfed in flames with his mother trapped inside. Not again, he muttered. Not this time. He moved quickly to the back door. We need to reach the barn if we can get to my horse. We'd be exposed crossing the yard, Dahlia pointed out. Better than burning alive, Zach checked outside, noting the positions of the outlaws from their muzzle flashes. There's a route between the woodpile and the chicken coop if we're fast. Dahlia caught his arm. Zachary, if we don't make it. He looked down at her, this golden-haired woman who had somehow breached walls he'd thought impenetrable. In that moment, with death pressing close from all sides, Zachary Harding made a choice. We're going to make it, he said firmly. And afterward I'd like to court you properly, Dahlia Caldwell, if you'll allow it. Her eyes widened, then softened with a smile that outshone the growing flames. I'd allow it, Zachary Harding. Gladly. The roof was burning in earnest now, flames licking at the night sky. Smoke filled the cabin, making it hard to breathe. Stay close, Zach instructed, wrapping his bandana around Dahlia's face to filter the smoke. Wait for my signal, then run for the woodpile. Don't stop for anything. She nodded, clutching her rifle. Zach fired twice through the front window, then immediately yanked open the back door. Now, they burst into the frigid night, running low across the snow-covered yard. A shout went up from one of Holly's men. Gunshots followed, kicking up snow at their heels. Zach returned fire, forcing their pursuers to duck for cover. They reached the woodpile, pressing against it as bullets splintered logs inches from their heads. The barn's 30 yards away, Zach gasped, reloading quickly. Too exposed. The root cellar, Dahlia whispered urgently, behind the chicken coop. Father built it with a tunnel that comes up in the barn, for emergencies. Hope surged through Zach, show me. Staying low, they made their way to the chicken coop. Behind it, half hidden by snow, Dahlia uncovered a trapdoor set into the ground. They slipped inside just as more gunfire raked their previous position. The root cellar was pitch black and smelled of earth and preserved vegetables. Dahlia moved confidently through the darkness, leading Zach to a narrow tunnel braced with timber. It's tight but passable, she whispered. Father dug it after the blizzard of '72 trapped him in the barn for 3 days. They crawled through the cramped passage, emerging finally into the barn's earthen floor, hidden beneath a pile of straw. Dusty whinnied softly, recognizing Zach's scent. Good boy, Zach murmured, quickly saddling the gelding. Outside, they could hear the outlaws searching, their voices growing more frustrated as the flames from the cabin illuminated the night. They'll check the barn soon, Dahlia said, peering through a crack in the wall. The cabin's nearly gone. Zach finished securing the saddle. We'll make for the Triple Crown, it's our best chance. He helped Dahlia mount, then swung up behind her. Ready? She nodded, leaning back against his chest. Ready. With a silent prayer, Zach urged Dusty toward the barn doors. The gelding burst out into the snow, startling the nearest outlaw, who fumbled for his weapon. Zach's revolver cracked once, and the man fell. There they go, Hollies roared from near the burning cabin. After them. Dusty was running full out now, his powerful legs pumping through the deep snow. Behind them, Zach could hear the outlaws scrambling for their horses, but they had precious seconds of head start. Hold tight, he called to Dahlia as they plunged into the tree line at the property's edge. The darkness swallowed them, Dusty navigating by instinct through the familiar forest. Gunshots rang out behind them, but the night and the trees made targets impossible. Soon the sounds of pursuit faded as Dusty carried them deeper into the wilderness, away from the burning remains of Dahlia Caldwell's home. Dawn found them exhausted but alive, emerging from the forest onto Triple Crown land. Dusty, spent from his heroic run, walked slowly now, steam rising from his heaving flanks. Dahlia, half asleep against Zach's chest, stirred as the ranch buildings came into view. We made it, she murmured, her voice hoarse from smoke and cold. We made it, Zach confirmed, his arms tightening protectively around her. Curtis Donnelly himself came running out as they approached, followed by several ranch hands. Good God, Harding, what happened? Zach dismounted stiffly, then helped Dahlia down. Outlaws burned Miss Caldwell's place. Tried to kill us both. Miss Caldwell, Donnelly looked shocked. Are you hurt, ma'am? Dahlia shook her head, though she swayed slightly with exhaustion. Just tired and homeless, it seems. Not homeless, Donnelly said firmly. The Triple Crown looks after its own. You'll stay here until we sort this out. He turned to the gathered hands. Jenkins, ride for the sheriff in Pine Ridge. Martin, see to Harding's horse. The rest of you keep sharp. If outlaws are bold enough to burn a homestead, they might try the ranch next. As the men dispersed to their tasks, Donnelly led Zach and Dahlia toward the main house. Mrs. Donnelly will see you settled, miss. And Harding, he clasped Zach's shoulder. Good work bringing her back safe. Thank you, sir. Zach glanced at Dahlia, who managed a small smile despite her exhaustion. But I think she might have saved me as much as I saved her. Later, after hot baths and warm meals, with Dahlia resting in the Donnellys' guest room, Zach sat with his employer in the ranch office. He recounted the night's events in full, including his suspicions about Hollies and his men. Sounds like the Hollies gang, Donnelly said grimly. They've been terrorizing homesteaders across 3 territories. Sheriffs had a bulletin about them for months. They wanted the Caldwell place for a hideout, Zach explained. Remote but established, perfect for their operations. Donnelly nodded thoughtfully. And now Miss Caldwell has nothing. She has me, Zach said, the words coming unbidden but with absolute certainty. If she'll have me. The ranch owner studied him with newfound respect. Well, well. Never thought I'd see the day Zachary Harding let someone past those walls of his. He leaned forward. You sure about this? Courting comes with complications, especially with a woman who's just lost everything. I'm sure, for the first time in years, Zach felt completely certain about something. She didn't lose everything, Mr. Donnelly. Just the cabin, what matters, her courage, her determination, her spirit, that's all intact. Donnelly chuckled. You've got it bad, son. More seriously, he added, what will you do now? The outlaws might come back. They will, Zach agreed. Men like Hollies don't give up easily, but neither do I. He met his employer's gaze steadily. I'd like your permission to marry Miss Caldwell, sir, and to rebuild on her land with Triple Crown help. Make it a proper place, one we can defend. Donnelly's bushy eyebrows shot up. Marriage, that's moving mighty fast, Harding. The frontier doesn't give us the luxury of slow courtship, sir. And some things, once you know them, you just know. Zach leaned forward. I spent years keeping everyone at a distance, thought that was the only way to survive out here, but last night, fighting alongside Dahlia, I realized something. Surviving isn't enough. I want to live, and I want to live with her. A slow smile spread across Donnelly's weathered face. Well, I'll be damned, he extended his hand. You have my blessing, son, and the Triple Crown's support. We take care of our own. Zach shook his hand, gratitude and determination mingling in his chest. Thank you, sir. Just one question, Harding. Have you actually asked the lady yet? Zach smiled ruefully. Not properly, no. Got interrupted by outlaws trying to kill us. Donnelly laughed. Well, that's a story to tell your grandchildren. He stood, clapping Zach on the shoulder. Get some rest. Tomorrow's soon enough to propose. Something tells me she won't be going anywhere. The following morning dawned clear and cold, the snow-covered landscape glittering under a brilliant blue sky. Zach found Dahlia on the main house's porch, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, watching the ranch hands go about their morning chores. How did you sleep? He asked, joining her at the railing. Surprisingly well, considering. She turned to face him, her golden hair neatly braided, her blue eyes clear despite the previous night's ordeal. Mrs. Donnelly has been very kind. She's even lent me some clothes. Zach nodded, suddenly nervous. He'd faced down outlaws without hesitation, but asking this woman to share his life seemed infinitely more daunting. Zachary, Dahlia said before he could gather his thoughts, I've been thinking about what happens now. So have I. He took a deep breath. Dahlia, I know this is sudden and perhaps not the proper way of doing things, but I want to rebuild, she interrupted. On my father's land, it's still mine, even if the cabin's gone. Zach blinked, momentarily derailed. Yes, of course, that's what I wanted to discuss. Mr. Donnelly has offered the ranch's help to rebuild. A proper house this time, with defensible positions. That's very generous. There's more. Zach took her hands in his. Last night, when I thought we might not survive, I realized something. All these years I've been existing, not living. Keeping everyone at a distance because I was afraid of loss. He squeezed her fingers gently. But you showed me that some things are worth the risk. Dahlia's eyes softened. Zachary. I want to rebuild with you, Dahlia. Not just the homestead, but a life. He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. I'm asking if you'll marry me, be my wife, my partner in whatever comes. For a moment, she simply looked at him, emotions playing across her expressive face, surprise, joy, uncertainty. We've known each other such a short time, she said softly. Time enough for me to know my own heart, Zach replied. Out here, we don't always get the luxury of long courtships. But I promise you this, I'll spend every day learning you, cherishing you, building a life worthy of your courage. Tears welled in Dahlia's blue eyes. Last night, when the cabin was burning, I wasn't afraid of losing the structure. I was afraid of losing you, of watching you die defending me and my father's dream. She squeezed his hands. That's when I knew. Knew what? Zach asked, his heart pounding. That I love you, Zachary Harding. And yes, I will marry you. Joy surged through Zach as he rose to his feet, pulling Dahlia into his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the passion of two souls who had found in each other something worth fighting for. From the doorway, Curtis Donnelly cleared his throat loudly. I see you didn't waste any time, Harding, he said with a grin when they broke apart, blushing. No, sir, Zach agreed, keeping his arm around Dahlia's waist. When you know, you know. Indeed, Donnelly stepped onto the porch, followed by Sheriff Miller and two deputies. Sheriffs hear about those outlaws. Sheriff Miller, a tall man with a salt and pepper mustache, tipped his hat to Dahlia. Miss Caldwell, terrible sorry about your place. Mr. Donnelly's filled me in on what happened. Can you catch them, Sheriff? Dahlia asked. We'll certainly try. Holly's gang's been a thorn in our side for months. Miller turned to Zach. I'd like you both to come into town later, give formal statements, but first, there's something you should know. His expression grew grave. We found 3 bodies at what's left of the Caldwell place. Looks like your defense was more effective than you realized. Zach felt Dahlia stiffen beside him. Holly's. Miller shook his head. No, 3 of his men, Holly's and at least 1 other, got away, but they won't get far. I've telegraphed descriptions to every sheriff's office in 3 territories. They'll come back, Zach said with certainty. Men like Holly's don't let go of a grudge. That's why I'm deputizing you, Harding, Miller said, producing a deputy's badge. Donnelly says you're steady with a gun and cool under pressure. I need men like that while we hunt down Holly's. He glanced at Dahlia. It'll help keep Miss Caldwell safe, too. Zach accepted the badge, feeling its weight in his palm. I'm honored, Sheriff, but I should tell you Miss Caldwell and I are engaged to be married. I'll be helping her rebuild on her land." Miller smiled. "Congratulations, and that works out fine. Having a deputy living at the Caldwell place will make Hollies think twice about returning." He glanced at Donnelly. "Curtis here tells me the Triple Crown's providing men and materials to rebuild. We'll make it a community effort, get folks from Pine Ridge involved too. Show these outlaws that this territory takes care of its own." Later that day, as they rode into Pine Ridge with Sheriff Miller, Dahlia leaned against Zach's chest, secure in the circle of his arms. "Are you nervous," she asked, "about Holly's coming back?" Zach considered the question. "Cautious," he said finally, "but not afraid, not anymore." He tightened his arm around her waist. "What about you? You've lost so much." She was quiet for a moment, watching the landscape pass. "I was singing to my father that day you first found me," she said softly, "a winter hymn he loved. I thought I was singing to someone who would never return, someone forever lost to me." She turned her face up to his. "But maybe I was really singing to my future, to you." Zach bent to kiss her forehead, overwhelmed by the certainty that had replaced his years of careful isolation. "I think perhaps we found each other, Dahlia Caldwell, and I don't intend to ever let you go." Spring came early to Wyoming Territory that year. By March, the snow was retreating from the valley, revealing the first tender shoots of new growth. On the Caldwell homestead, the ruins of the burned cabin had been cleared away, replaced by a sturdy two-story house built with the combined efforts of the Triple Crown Ranch and the people of Pine Ridge. Wedding preparations were underway, with the ceremony planned for the first Sunday in April. Sheriff Miller had caught no sign of Vince Hollies or his remaining men, but the threat of their return hung like a shadow over the happiness Zach and Dahlia had found. "You're thinking about Hollies again," Dahlia observed one evening as they sat on the porch of their new home. Her golden hair caught the last rays of sunset as she rocked gently in the chair Zach had built for her. "Just being vigilant," Zach replied, his deputy's badge gleaming on his vest. "Sheriff Miller thinks they've left the territory, but I'm not so sure." Dahlia reached for his hand. "We can't live in fear, Zachary. That's no life at all." He squeezed her fingers, marveling at how this woman had transformed him in just a few short months. "You're right, as usual." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" She smiled. "Only 3 times, you're falling behind." Their laughter was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching horses. Zach was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Stay here," he said, scanning the trail that led to the main road. "Not a chance," Dahlia replied, reaching for the rifle that was never far from hand these days. 4 riders appeared, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Zach tensed, then relaxed as he recognized Curtis Donnelly's distinctive figure leading the group. "It's Donnelly," he told Dahlia. "And some of the hands." They stepped off the porch to greet their visitors. Donnelly dismounted with a grin, followed by Bill Jenkins and 2 other ranch hands. "Evening, Deputy," Donnelly called. "Miss Caldwell. Hope we're not interrupting your courting time." "Not at all," Dahlia replied warmly. "What brings you out this way?" Donnelly's expression grew serious. "News, I'm afraid. Sheriff Miller sent a rider to the ranch. They've spotted Hollies." Zach felt Dahlia stiffen beside him. "Where?" 2 days' ride north, near the Montana line. "Tried to rob a stage. Driver recognized him from the wanted posters." Donnelly glanced at the new house. "Sheriff thinks he might be headed this way. Sent us to warn you and provide some extra guns just in case." "That's very kind," Dahlia said, her voice steady despite the news. "Not kindness, miss, family." Donnelly gestured to the hands. "These boys volunteered, said they wouldn't miss your wedding for anything, especially not because of some 2-bit outlaw." Zach shook hands with each man, deeply touched by their loyalty. "We appreciate it. Come inside." Dahlia's made venison stew. As they moved toward the house, Jenkins hung back, speaking quietly to Zach. "There's more, Harding." Miller didn't want to alarm Miss Caldwell, but a passenger on the stage heard Hollies ranting about settling scores. "Called you and Miss Caldwell out by name." Cold determination settled in Zach's chest. "Then we'll be ready for him." The next few days passed in tense vigilance. Donnelly's men took shifts watching the approaches to the homestead, while Zach and Dahlia continued preparations for their wedding, refusing to let Hollies' threat disrupt their plans. The Reverend confirmed he'll be here Sunday, Dahlia said as they shared breakfast 3 days before the wedding, and Mrs. Donnelly is bringing the cake on Saturday. Zach nodded, though his attention was on the window, overlooking the northern approach. That's good. Dahlia set down her coffee cup with a sharp click. Zachary Harding, look at me. He turned, surprised by her tone. We are getting married on Sunday, she said firmly, here on this land surrounded by friends. I won't have Vince Holly stealing that from us. I'm just being cautious. You're obsessing, she corrected gently, and while I appreciate your protection, I need my future husband present in more than just body. Zach sighed, recognizing the truth in her words. You're right. I'm sorry, he reached across the table for her hand. I just can't bear the thought of anything happening to you, not now when we're so close to everything we've dreamed of. Her blue eyes softened. Nothing will happen to me or to you. We survived once, we'll survive again if necessary. She squeezed his fingers. But for now, can we please focus on our wedding? I need your opinion on whether the ceremony should be inside or on the porch. Zach smiled, forcing his thoughts away from Holly's. The porch, he said decisively, so all of creation can witness my good fortune in marrying you. Her radiant smile was worth every effort to put aside his worries. Saturday dawned clear and mild, a perfect early spring day. Wedding guests would begin arriving that afternoon, with many planning to camp on the property overnight for the Sunday ceremony. Zach was checking the newly constructed barn when Jenkins rode in from his patrol, his expression grim. Riders coming, he reported tersely, 6 of them moving fast from the east, not looking friendly. Zach's heart sank. Holly's. Looks that way. Get Dahlia to the root cellar, Zach ordered, checking his revolver. Send Martin to Pine Ridge for the sheriff, the rest of us will hold them off. Jenkins nodded, turning his horse toward the house, but before he could reach it, gunfire erupted from the tree line to the north, an unexpected direction. Ambush, Zach shouted, diving for cover as bullets splintered the barn wall beside him. Everything happened with terrifying speed after that. Jenkins was hit, tumbling from his saddle with a cry of pain. The other ranch hands returned fire from their positions, but they were caught in a crossfire between the approaching riders and hidden gunmen in the trees. Zach's only thought was for Dahlia. Keeping low, he made a desperate run for the house, bullets kicking up dirt at his heels. He burst through the door to find Dahlia already armed, her father's Winchester in her hands. They're surrounding us, he gasped. At least 6, maybe more. Dahlia's face was pale but determined. The root cellar again. No time, they're too close. Zach peered out the window. We make our stand here. The walls are thick, better protection. From outside came Vince Holly's voice, loud and mocking. Come out, Deputy Harding, bring your pretty bride-to-be. Let's settle this face to face. Zach and Dahlia exchanged looks. Not a chance, Zach muttered. Holly's, he called through the window. You're making a mistake. Sheriff Miller's on his way with a posse. A barking laugh answered him. Nice try, deputy. We cut the telegraph lines to Pine Ridge yesterday. No one's coming to save you. There was a pause then. I'm feeling generous today. Send out the woman and you can die quick instead of slow. Dahlia's hand found Zach's, squeezing tight. Together, she whispered. Whatever happens. Together, he agreed, pressing a fierce kiss to her lips. The next hours blurred into a nightmarish cycle of gunfire, smoke, and desperate strategy. Holly's men tried repeatedly to approach the house, only to be driven back by Zach and Dahlia's combined firepower. One of the ranch hands managed to join them inside, while another lay wounded but still fighting from the cover of the water trough. By mid-afternoon, they were running dangerously low on ammunition. The outlaws had set fire to the barn and thick smoke drifted across the yard, reducing visibility. We need to try for the horses, Zach said, counting his remaining bullets. Make a break for it while the smoke gives us cover. Dahlia nodded grimly. Her face was streaked with gunpowder, her golden hair falling from its pins, but her hands remained steady on her rifle. Ready when you are, she said. Before they could move, however, a new sound reached them, distant at first, then growing louder. Hoofbeats, many of them approaching fast from the south. The sheriff? Dahlia asked, hope flaring in her eyes. Zach peered through the smoke. Someone's coming, but how would Miller know? The wedding guests, Dahlia breathed. They were due to arrive today. Sure enough, emerging from the smoke came a dozen riders, led by Sheriff Miller himself and Curtis Donnelly. Behind them rode more ranch hands, townspeople from Pine Ridge, and even old Edgar Hartwick from the general store, an ancient shotgun clutched in his gnarled hands. "It's over, Hollies," Miller's voice boomed across the yard. "Throw down your weapons." For a moment, nothing happened. Then gunfire erupted again, Hollies and his remaining men making a desperate stand, but they were hopelessly outnumbered now. Within minutes, 3 outlaws lay dead in the yard, 2 more had surrendered, and Vince Hollies himself was face down in the dirt, Sheriff Miller's knee in his back as he was handcuffed. Zach and Dahlia emerged from the house, dazed but unharmed. Donnelly rushed to meet them, concern etched on his weathered face. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "We're fine," Zach assured him, his arm tight around Dahlia's waist. "Jenkins took a bullet, though." "And Martin?" "Already being tended to," Donnelly said. "Doc Wilson came with us. Both should pull through." Sheriff Miller approached, dragging a sullen Hollies with him. "Thought you might want to see this snake properly caught," he said, shoving the outlaw forward. "He'll hang in Cheyenne next month." Hollies spat at Zach's feet. "Should have killed you when I had the chance, deputy." "Yes," Zach agreed calmly, "you should have." He looked at Dahlia, then back at the outlaw. "But then, men like you never understand what's worth fighting for until it's too late." As Miller led Hollies away, Dahlia leaned against Zach, exhaustion finally catching up to her. "Our wedding," she murmured. "The house is still standing," Zach finished for her, looking around. The barn was a loss and bullet holes riddled the porch, but the house itself had held firm. "And our friends are here," he smiled down at her. "I see no reason to postpone." Donnelly cleared his throat. "Actually, if I might make a suggestion," when they looked at him, he continued, "why wait? Reverend Thompson is right over there, tending to Jenkins. You've got witnesses aplenty, why not get married today?" Dahlia's eyes widened. "Today, but everything's a mess, my dress is still packed away, there's no cake." "Do you love this man?" Donnelly interrupted gently. "With all my heart," Dahlia answered without hesitation. "And you, Harding, do you love this woman?" "More than life itself," Zach replied. Donnelly spread his hands. "Then the rest is just decoration. After what you've both just survived, seems to me there's no better time to affirm that love than right now." Zach looked down at Dahlia, a question in his eyes. She hesitated only a moment before a radiant smile broke across her face. "He's right," she said. "I don't want to wait another day to be your wife." An hour later, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Zachary Harding and Dahlia Caldwell stood on the bullet-scarred porch of their home, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and allies. Dahlia wore her mother's locket and a hastily arranged crown of early spring flowers in her golden hair. Zach stood tall in his best shirt, the deputy's badge pinned proudly to his chest. Reverend Thompson, his Bible open in his weathered hands, spoke of love's endurance through trial and hardship, of 2 souls finding each other against all odds, of building a life together on a foundation stronger than any cabin or house, a foundation of mutual respect, shared courage, and abiding love. "Do you, Zachary Harding, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To love, honor, and protect her in good times and in hardship, for as long as you both shall live?" Zach looked into Dahlia's blue eyes, seeing in them everything he'd once thought lost to him: home, family, a future worth fighting for. "I do," he said, his voice clear and certain. "And do you, Dahlia Caldwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To love, honor, and cherish him, in plenty and in want, for as long as you both shall live?" Dahlia's smile was luminous as she answered, "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me, and in the presence of God and these witnesses, I pronounce you husband and wife." The Reverend closed his Bible with a smile. "You may kiss your bride, Deputy Harding." As their lips met, sealing their vows amid cheers and applause, Zach knew with absolute certainty that the walls he'd built around his heart had not just crumbled, it had been transformed into the foundation of something far stronger. A home built for 2, designed to weather whatever storms the frontier might send their way. Later that evening, as impromptu wedding celebrations continued around campfires in their yard, Zach found Dahlia standing alone near the spot where he had first seen her, singing a hymn to her father's grave. "Happy Mrs. Harding?" he asked softly, coming up behind her. She turned, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Very much so, Mr. Harding, her hand found his. Though I was just thinking about my father. Wishing he could have been here today. I think he was, Zach said, drawing her into his arms. In the home we've built on his land, in your courage, in the community that came together to defend what he started. Dahlia rested her head against his chest. I used to sing hymns to him after he died. It felt like the only connection I had left. She looked up at Zach, her expression serene. But you were right, that first day, my voice carried in this valley, and somehow it carried to you. I'm glad it did, Zach murmured, bending to kiss her forehead. Though I never imagined, when I heard you singing a winter hymn to someone who never returned, that I'd be the one returning to you instead. Dahlia smiled, lifting her face for a proper kiss. Perhaps that's the greatest frontier lesson of all, she whispered against his lips, that even in our deepest solitude, we're never truly alone. There's always someone riding toward us over the horizon, if only we have the courage to wait, to hope, to sing our hearts into the wilderness. And to open the door when they arrive, Zach added, holding her close under the vast Wyoming sky, the light of their future bright as the stars above.